for joining us today for Exploring ThinkHR, 3 Ways to Simplify Your HR Challenges webinar. Diversified Employer Solutions has partnered with ThinkHR to provide you with tools and resources that will help you solve your HR challenges at no cost to you. Just before I turn the presentation over to our speaker, Laura Holland from ThinkHR, I wanted to go over just a few housekeeping items. First, everyone is currently muted in listen-only mode for this webinar. This will help keep the webinar moving along and keep us to our designated time frame. However, we do have time reserved at the end of the presentation for questions. If you do have a question throughout the webinar, please feel free to type it in the box along the right-hand side of the screen. Laura will answer questions at the end of the presentation. Now I'd like to turn the microphone over to today's presenter, Laura Holland from ThinkHR. Laura is a Partner Success Manager and has worked with employee benefits, HR technology for nearly 5 years. Laura?
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar here today. I'm very excited to be partnering with Diversified Employer Solutions to cover some of the ThinkHR solutions here today. As Chris mentioned, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that do come through, so please don't be shy. I know you are muted, but feel free to chat in the GoToWebinar box. I'll be taking a peek at those a little bit later in our webinar here today. So I'm going to be going ahead and sharing my screen. So I'll take a minute just to do that. Let that go through. And everyone should be seeing a page of the Diversified website at this point. So just before we go ahead and dive in, like Chris mentioned one more time, we will be going through 3 ways to simplify your HR challenges using ThinkHR solutions here today. Perhaps some of you are familiar with ThinkHR. Maybe you've seen some of the solutions here before. We have made some changes. We've moved some things around. So I always think it's a good idea to review some of these strategies and these solutions because they're getting better all the time. So let's just go ahead and dive in. So just to cover the basics here, I did want to start one step outside of the ThinkHR solution itself and just talking about logging in, given that some of you haven't done that before. So very easy. Diversified has made this incredibly easy for you to be able to log in. One, you should have a username and password has been emailed to you. If you don't see that in your inbox or you think it's been a while, go ahead and let them or myself know, and we can always help you with that a little bit after the webinar here today. But again, Diversified has taken steps to make this available to you in ways not everyone has. So they've actually put the login module directly on their website, which is what we're looking at here today. So incredibly easy. Looks like they even have a link for it here. But it doesn't get easier than that to be able to access the solution to log in or even refer to that hotline number, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But that number, when you're in a pinch, that's something you need to access fast, and knowing that it's on their website is that much more convenient. So pretty basic to log in. Again, if you don't see your login information in your inbox or think it's been a little while, absolutely let someone know. We'd be more than happy to help with that. All right. So I have a few tabs open here today. I got a little bit of a head start for us. But let's talk about what happens when you log in. So everything that we're looking at here today is a great representation of the 3 solutions that we're going to run through. I'll list them off in just a second here, but I like to talk about this home page because it's incredibly easy to navigate for you, to be able to isolate and locate the information that you're looking for. So let's start off with the first solution here. I'm always excited to jump right in. But the first solution we're going to talk about here today is what we call ThinkHR Live, or what might be referenced by Diversified, or if you're on the phone call with me, we call it the hotline, or the HR hotline. So it is a huge resource. It is one of the most popular resources that we're known for, and it's probably something that Diversified has talked about with you, just because it is something that is incredibly helpful to have access to. And ThinkHR Live, just because it is such a big part of what we provide, we haven't even bothered with clicking to another page to be able to access that information. We think that is so important that you have the ability to get the answers you need, that we've just put it on our main page here. So I'll scroll down a little bit. We'll get to these buttons again. But the solution that I'm very excited to talk about first, again, is talking about that hotline. So covering some of the basics, I think that it's good for you to know some of these things. There are actually two ways that you can engage with our hotline team. So obviously, being a hotline, the first inclination or the first thought that comes to mind is, oh, I'm going to dial in. I'm going to have to shut my door, to my office, and I'm going to have to isolate myself to be able to have a long conversation with someone about my issue. And that's not necessarily the case. So yes, of course, dialing in is one of the most popular options to take. And that number is, again, right here, as well as on the Diversified website for quick reference. But this is a number that I suggest writing down. Put that on a Post-it, tape it to your monitor, put it in your top drawer. This is a number that, when you're in a pinch, you're going to need to call. So that's the obvious way, being able to call in and talk to one of our hotline advisors. It's a great option. But we also have a second option, which is going to be involved with this box underneath that number. So, maybe it's not a very urgent question. Maybe it's more of a checking up on your information. Whatever the case, go ahead and type in some information about your question in this box. Provide as much context as you wish, but do your best to be able to describe, the situation at hand. We will also ask for some additional information, putting that question into some kind of a category, whatever it best fits, to help us choose an advisor to help you. But also we ask for the number of employees at your company, the city, the state, the type of company, public, private, nonprofit, things like that. This information helps us, obviously, with some of those questions to be able to give you the best answer and set you on the right track to being able to figure out how to proceed with a course of action. So either way, we want to collect that information however you want to give it to us. So what happens when you ask a question? That's a question that I answer a lot. Well, it doesn't matter if you call in or if you type in your question. Those questions go to the exact same place. They are answered by the exact same team of advisors with the same level of education, the same responsive times, things like that. So don't let that deter you from using one option or the other. But one thing that you can be guaranteed, whether you type out your question or you call in, that you're going to receive a follow-up email. I've heard stories of situations where someone is calling the hotline and has a very long story, has a lot of details to relay, and that's incredibly stressful to be able to do. And so you want to make sure you have all your information out, but then again, frantically taking notes on what that advisor is telling you can be a little difficult to do at that time. So you receive a follow-up email from the advisor that you spoke with or communicated with online, and it's going to document all the different areas of what you talked about in that conversation. So you're going to have something that you can reference later. A lot of times, depending on what kind of a question it is, those follow-up emails might also include reference material. So you can figure out a course of action, or how to prevent that from happening in the future again, or things like that. So one thing that we want to make sure that we offer is a robust answer, that we're not just answering the question at hand, that we're able to stop issues from recurring, or provide peace of mind to make sure that you know how to handle the situation if it did occur again. So Also, a piece I like to talk about at this point, that's your experience when you call in or when you type your question in. But I also like to tell you a little bit about the team themselves. I think that is important that you know who you're speaking with or communicating with about these questions. So our hotline team is located in Northern California. The hours of operation that they are answering questions are between 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central Time. So once again, 11 hours a day, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Central Time. And of course, you can submit questions, you can send messages outside of that time. It's just that during that time, that is when they are actively researching and answering those questions. So there are about 20 people on this team at this point. It is growing. And everyone on the team is PHR or SPHR certified, so you know that you're talking to somebody who has the correct certification, who is absolutely able to answer these questions that you're speaking with them about. I would say the average length of experience on the team is about 13 or 14 years. And by describing it that way, I want you to know that these individuals have spent their fair share of time actually in HR roles. So they've been in situations that you're calling about, and you can be sure about that. I'm trying to think, is there anything else I'm missing about that team? And I think I've given you, a good amount of information about the hotline itself, how to use it, who you're talking to, and why you should do that. Also, we do endeavor to provide 100% same-day resolution. So just know that we know timeliness is a factor. We want to make sure everyone has the right answer that they need. On a rare occasion, there might be an exception to that. And the only reason I bring this up is because they will communicate with you if they need to find more information. It's a rare occasion, but if it is a complex question, you want to make sure you have the right answer. All right, so if there are any other questions about what we call ThinkHR Live or that hotline itself, maybe you want to share an experience that you've already had, go ahead and type that in the chat. I'd love to hear that. But moving on to the second solution here. So obviously that hotline, always keep that in your back pocket. Like I said, tape that, that phone number to your monitor, to the wall, put it in your cell phone, anything that you can do to prepare for any complex questions in the future. All right, so the second piece here that I'm going to talk about, our second way to simplify HR challenges, is going to be engaging with this first dot here, what is titled Comply. I've opened Comply in another tab. So this is the way it would open up for you. So it looks a little bit similar to that home page we just left, but this is really a central location of reference material as well as tools and builders. And I'll get a little bit more specific about those last two pieces in just a minute here. But I'm sure everyone has searched for something before. Don't need to really go through how to use this, but I do like to use some examples about searching for information in Comply. So I'm going to use a very robust, a very general, generic answer, generic subject to be able to put that into our search function here today. The reason that I'm taking you through the search process, as simple as it is really to isolate what happens when answers come on my screen. What kind of results do I get from searching for something as robust as FMLA? I'm going to get hundreds of answers. So I like to just showcase what happens when you do this search, and you can see that up to the left side here. Not only are there colors, but there are different categories to be able to isolate and really drill down into what kind of a solution or what kind of a reference material you're looking for. So whether that be checklists, something a little bit more creative, maybe it's commentary, maybe you just want to read about a certain subject. But forms, I know that's a popular one. Sample policies. Two that I like to really talk about at this point are the questions and the webinars. So those are kind of unique pieces that might come up in a search. And when I say unique, I mean unique to a ThinkHR search. So let's talk about the questions a little bit here. So 147 questions. That's a lot. What kind of questions are these? What is this referencing? Well, let me tell you. So one thing that our hotline team does to be proactive with some of the answers to popular questions that they get is actually go in, choose some of these popular questions, make sure there isn't any information or private information in that question, take that out, but use it as an example question for one that they're getting often. So let me click on questions here. For example, does FMLA apply to employers of all size, even those with fewer than 25 employees? You know, and the list goes on. So these are examples of what our HR hotline team has done in being proactive with popular questions and answers. So I think that the question area is a huge piece of being able to find answers. So always be able to engage with that, being able to isolate some of those questions. Maybe somebody's asked your question already. Nonetheless, I'm going to go back here, but nonetheless, if you don't see your question or something isn't quite describing what you are looking for, don't worry about it. Just call the hotline. You know, being able to call in is the reason it's there. Back to my question here, the other piece I want to isolate are webinars. So as you can see, there are 5 webinars available to be able to be related to my search of FMLA. So another piece that our hotline team is working on to be, again, proactive with information that is popular. They include some of these questions that people get in their webinars. So it looks like there are 5 webinars that talk about FMLA. But our webinar library is growing every month, which is very exciting. These webinars that the hotline team puts on are absolutely things that you would be able to attend. So I'll showcase that webinar library in just a second here. So I'll go back to the main page of Comply. I searched, very simple to be able to do that. Other ways of drilling down in information include these categories up here at the top. So maybe that's a way you're going to drill down and find some information in there. But there are 2 pieces back here that I want to isolate as well. So under Resources and Tools, this is where you're going to find what I referenced as the Webinars library. Give that a second to load. So each and every webinar that this hotline team does put on is going to be recorded. So we did one, looks like last week, 3 secrets to building your coaching habit, high impact strategies for 2016. You know, it's very active and well attended. So I'm going to scroll back here to, oops, I passed, but one of the top webinars that we've had in the last few months here, one of the most well attended ones, was on November 10th, and it was covering filing forms 1094C and 1095C. I can tell you we had over 1,800 people attend this when it was live, so while it was being recorded that first time. And that attendance has only grown. So people are making time for these. Obviously, if you can't attend while it's being recorded, we have those recordings available. You can pause them. You can come back to them later. Nonetheless, we want to make sure that if this is the best way to share information with you, you have access. All right, so the last piece here, and this is due to, this is a recent revelation from all the feedback that we get from you as well as brokers like Diversified, but we get feedback about making things easier all the time. And one thing that was requested was drilling down or being able to isolate states and their employment laws to be able to find and access that information easily. So we have an interactive map that you can use. We can drill down into a certain state. Let's take a peek at Wisconsin. So any applicable law alerts, direct links to other vetted websites that are important, but being able to take a peek at what's truly unique to your state is a really great piece. I'll go back to the main page of Comply here. So I've covered the reference material. That's really what's housed up here at the top. So that was pretty straightforward. The piece that I think makes this solution so unique is really these tools and what I call builders down here at the bottom. So obviously right here, the Q&A database. When I talked about doing a search and finding that category of question, this is what I'm talking about. So we actually have a broken out area for question and answers. So being able to go into here and search for something, I think is pretty cool. Give that just a second to load. So for instance, the #1 question, most viewed question, and this has been consistent for a while, but what is the best day of the week and time to perform a termination of employment? I-9s. Our offices were closed because of a storm. You know, how does that affect our workforce? Things like that. I'll go back to the main page of Comply one more time and talk about some of these other builders. But again, due to feedback, we had, a few months ago, we had a handbook builder that just built federal level handbooks. That was all it did. And a federal level handbook can be incredibly bulky if you're trying to use a builder to be able to make it. It can be long and it can be cumbersome to be able to look through all that information. And so one thing that we've done is actually made this, again, state-specific. We are the only state-specific handbook builder that is an electronic tool on the market here. So being able to drill down, click in here and say, I want to build one for Wisconsin. And being able to go through that step by step, being able to save it, come back to it later, these are great pieces. So if the handbook needs a peek, or if you have any additional questions about the handbook builder itself, I'd be more than happy to go through that in a little bit more detail in an answer. All right, so classification tools, ensuring that you're classifying employees correctly, compensation tools, accessing reliable compensation information. We do partner with salary.com for this. So let's say you're hiring a remote employee across the country. You know, that might be a situation where you engage with a compensation tool in order to make sure that salary and benefits are on par. So job description builder, another piece that is rising in popularity. You want to make sure those job descriptions are tight. Oftentimes at the beginning of a year, I'll talk about this a little bit more, but it's a good time to take a peek, make sure anything that needs updating is updated, and any new positions have the correct description, especially if you're posting and hiring for these jobs. And then finally here, a central location for healthcare reform information. Very simple to be able to click into there and start navigating through pieces of information. So if there are any questions about Comply, I'm going to wrap this piece up pretty quickly here. Feel free to type those in the chat function. But a lot of information is housed in this area. I think those tools and builders make it a little bit more fun to engage. But again, when you need an answer, simple search function is really all you need. So I'm back on this main page here, and you might notice 3 of the solutions, or the builders that I talked about, are actually links up here. So as pieces change in ThinkHR, and I don't mean weekly or daily, you know, over the course of a few months or a quarter, you might see these links change. But again, they do link to resources that you have access to in Comply. So the last piece here, and I have this open again in another tab, but the third solution, or the third way to simplify HR challenges, is going to be using what we call ThinkHR Learn. So I really like talking about ThinkHR Learn. I think that this is a compelling conversation. I think that it's exciting because training and training resources are becoming increasingly popular. You know, there are a lot of ways to be able to engage with training currently, but as technology increases, there's some simpler ways to be able to talk about sexual harassment, talk about HIPAA training, talk about training your supervisors to handle some employee behavior. So training is a big piece of what I talk about on a daily basis here, and specifically talking about Learn. So I'll try to answer some questions or popular questions I get as I go through this. But this is a piece that I hope everyone on this webinar will at least take a peek at and try a training course, just because if you haven't had the training conversation yet, it's going to come, whether it's the next year, the next 2 years. Employee training is a hot topic at the moment. All right, so I'm logged in here as a user at your level. So I'm another client of Diversified here. So everything that I see is exactly what you're going to see when you log in here as well. So what am I looking at when I look at this page? It looks like I have a dashboard here, some links. I have a picture or a link to chat with someone at ThinkHR. There's a lot going on this page. So let me help you break it down. So what we're looking at is my courses. So I have a course in progress listed here, something that I started but I did not finish. And it looks like I started it today. So that's what this dashboard is really representing at this point. So I can make sure that I can engage with this again. I can go ahead and restart it and make sure that I finish that and get my certificate of completion. So very basic for that information. So as a user, that's really great. But everyone else, and I want to get into a little bit of this information here today, but I want to make sure that I am able to represent this page not only as your training resource so that you can take your training courses, but also I want to show you some of the capabilities here that you have as a contact to be able to ask your employees to complete some training. So I apologize if that's confusing, but I want to make sure you understand not only that this tracks your training, but also that you have access to make sure your employees complete it too. So to engage with that second part here, I'll do a brief overview. I believe we're going to go through this a little bit more detail. I think it's next week. But for anybody who's very curious, which I would be if I were in your position here, I like to talk a little bit about how you can ask some employees to take some training courses. So to be able to do that, we want to make sure that all of your, the people that you're going to ask to take training, whatever team that is, maybe it's your whole staff, we want to make sure anyone we're going to make sure completes training is registered before we can ask them. And I might go through that a lot. I might say that a lot here today, but the approach and the first, everyone has to be registered before they can take a training. So what I've done, I've navigated over here next to my name, and I clicked on the little gear, and a flyout menu has appeared from the right side. So I can click under Administration to expand my options, and I have 3 options here. I can view my users, so this would be useful after I add some employees who I want to take training. But I can also register a user one by one. I can register multiple users. I can do an import. And I would say, depending on what you're looking to do, how many people you're looking to add, each of these is going to be a good option for you. So if I were to register a single user, like my example here today, what I'm going to do is actually click on adding the single user, putting that person's information in. I can choose their username, I can choose their password, they can change it later. But making sure that I have the right information about this person so that I'm able to set them up for success for training. I can go ahead and click Submit. That person's going to receive a username and password to be able to access training. So we want to make sure that everybody has access or gains access first. I'm going to cancel out of this here. So that's part 1. Obviously, there is an option if we want to add en masse or upload a number of employees at once. I'd be more than happy to answer some questions about that or assist with that. So that's an option as well. But that really takes care of part one, adding employees. The second piece, if I go over here to course catalog, it's going to open a page that we haven't seen before. And essentially what this does is gives me access to all 200 plus training courses that I can choose from. But I'm going to isolate one, I'm going to select it, I'm going to make sure that I choose the right one, and then I'm going to ask my employees to take it. So to be able to do that, obviously a few ways you can do this. You can search courses. So for instance, today, maybe I'm asking my supervisors to take some training. I want to make sure that my supervisor team is well equipped with skills to deal with, employees who are causing trouble, or they're able to be trained on sexual harassment specifically for a supervisor role. The list goes on, and I know I often use sexual harassment as an example, but it is one of the most popular training courses that we offer, and it's rising in popularity as well. So lots of options. Again, I just typed in supervisors, and there are so many options here, but let's say we're having an attendance issue. We have it company-wide, and I want to make sure that my team of supervisors, my team of managers is well equipped to handle that. So I'm going to choose attendance management. To make sure I have the right course, I could either click on this and start it myself. I do recommend you take a training just to have that experience before asking somebody else to complete it. But there's also a description if I click on this little question mark. 21 minutes long. I think my team can handle that. All right, let's get ready to send these out. So next to our question mark over here on the right is an envelope that turns blue when I hover over it. And this is the piece that I want to select to ask someone to take a training course. All right. So what I'm going to do here, there's a brief warning in this pop-up message that comes up. It says, hey, pause. We want to make sure that everyone is registered before you send this, which they are. I can't stress that enough. We want to register them first. I'm good on that. But the next piece, I'm going to go ahead and copy this information here. I'm going to put it excuse me, into an email. And then when my team receives one of these, they're going to be able to simply click this link, put in their username and password, and be able to complete their training course. So it's incredibly simple to be able to do that. I could send this to as many people as I want who are registered users. Maybe I send it to the whole company to complete a sexual harassment course. Maybe I send it only to my supervisor group because we're talking about attendance management. So just be sure you're sending these to the right people, that you're asking them to take the training. All right, so I'm going to X out of that. I'm not going to save my changes. I'm going to close. So we have recently streamlined this to make it a little bit easier to be able to copy and paste this information and actually having you register your employees versus employees needing to self-register. We got some feedback about that. So, a pretty smooth process to be able to do that. So a lot of the questions that I receive at this point are about tracking. And how does one track all of the courses that they're asking their employees to take? So typically when somebody will, let's say we ask John Smith to complete a training. When John finishes his course, he's going to receive a link to a document, a PDF document that is what we call a certificate of completion. The certificate of completion looks like a certificate. It's a one-page document, and it's going to have John's name, the name of the course, as well as the, I believe it's the date that John completed that training course. And so he has that for his records. So we recommend that he send that to whoever's managing training. Maybe that's you, maybe that's another member of your HR team. But being able to communicate, when you are complete or when the training is complete, please send all certificates to Jane Smith at your company. So that's one way to be able to track that. The second way, you can actually go ahead and ask your contacts at Diversified to be able to run a report for you. Currently, the reporting function isn't available for those who are managing the training, but it is, that is something that Diversify would be more than happy to help with. So I know that there are training options out there. A lot of times, the things we've heard of are talking about bringing in a speaker for training, or passing around DVDs for some kind of training as well. I don't mean to poke holes in those, but if those are solutions you're currently using, the ability to electronically navigate and manage training could be a lot easier, more of a weight off the shoulders. DVDs get scratched, people are absent if you bring in a speaker. It takes a lot of manual recording to be able to make sure everybody completed it. But I know there are training options out there. I just encourage you to start thinking about, what courses in ThinkHR might be available for me? What can I do to help my teams be successful? All right. So I'm going to go back to our home page here. And let me see. So I'm going to check on some questions to see if we have any. I know a lot of times some questions trickle in after the fact, so if you want to email Diversified, I'd be more than happy to work with them on any last-minute ones. But ultimately, if we look at these three solutions and the ability to use them all together for different purposes, I think that provides a very robust way, a robust solution for you to tackle some of the challenges that you see. One aspect that I talked about with Diversified specifically was talking about some ways that you can support your staff. And I think using Learn or training is a huge piece of that. And I think we're getting into Learn a little bit more specifically next week, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you, Laura. You've given us a great introduction into ThinkHR. Now that Laura has actually walked us through ThinkHR, we hope you've gained a better understanding of what ThinkHR can offer you. We will actually be sending a recording of this webinar to all of you very soon. And as Laura mentioned, if you do have any questions after the fact, please do feel free to reach out to one of us from the Employer Solutions team. Next Wednesday, March 23rd at 1 o'clock, we will dive deeper into ThinkHR Learn. And Wednesday, April 6th at 1 o'clock, we will explore ThinkHR Learn, Live, and Comply in greater depth. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope you have a great afternoon.